Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to our webinar this afternoon on policy, regulatory and business focus on net zero emissions and sustainability. If you registered for this webinar a few weeks ago, you might notice that we have changed the title in that we have included sustainability, as it really is both. It's not one or the other. So my name is Kathleen O'Regan. I'm a senior executive in the Sustainability, Renewable Energy and Agritech department in Enterprise Ireland. You're all very welcome, as I said, to today's webinar. It's our sixth webinar in our series of webinars. So if you're with us from the start, thank you for sticking with us. And we hope you're gaining useful insights from the webinars. So this webinar will be recorded. We'll have a time at the end for questions and answers. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the questions and answers function. So feel free to put any questions in there, and we'll hopefully have time at the end to come to those. So as I mentioned, what we're talking about here today is, I suppose, how the whole landscape in terms of the changing, regulations and the increased business focus on net zero emissions and sustainability is really, accelerating. And why it's important to also include the broader sustainability as well as the net zero emissions. And I always refer to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation report, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation are renowned experts in circular economy. But they produced a report in 2019 that stated that switching to renewable energy or becoming more energy efficient will only cut greenhouse gas emissions by 55%. The remaining 45% comes from how we make and use products and how we produce food. So under the European Green Deal, all policy instruments and funding streams are aligned to net zero and a circular economy, decoupling resource use from economic growth and making sure that no person or place is left behind. So today we are going to hear from Ingrid de Donker, who is co-founder and head of research and innovation, Future Planet. And we will also hear from Sheila O'Loughlin, who's a senior market advisor in the Enterprise Ireland London office. So Ingrid is going to share, I suppose, the policy, regulatory and business focus on emissions and sustainability as it applies to both SMEs and to large companies, so taking into account both perspectives. And Sheila then is going to give an overview of the business focus on net zero emissions and sustainability in the UK. Last week, we covered sustainability and ESG reporting, and in particular CSRD. So today, I think, is a good follow-on from that, and Ingrid will walk us through what a sustainability journey looks like from an SME and from a large company's perspective. So Ingrid is an innovator in sustainable procurement and supply chain for the last 20 years. She's a part-time lecturer in 3 universities and active as a sustainable procurement subject matter expert in public and private industry groups and EU innovation procurement networks. As co-founder and head of research and innovation at Future Planet, she applies her deep procurement and supply chain expertise to guide companies to buy more responsibly. Future Planet is like Google Map for sustainability. It is a software platform that guides organizations to develop their sustainability strategy, tracks and measures ESG data, actionable improvement plans, and automates compliance reporting. And Future Planet won the prestigious Irish Times Innovation Award in November 2022. So it's great to have Ingrid with us today.
Thank you so much.
Sheila has over 25 years experience working with a range of companies, from startup to large companies, advising on the UK market entry and growth strategy and business development. She has worked in the healthcare, engineering, food and drink, and also water and wastewater sectors. More recently, she's taken on a sustainability brief to help Irish companies understand the key trends driving sustainability across UK industry. Before I hand over to Ingrid, I'd just like to talk a little bit, I suppose, about the overall kind of policy changes that we see happening now or happening in the future. And while this slide is a little bit busy, and I do apologise for that, we will be sharing slides afterwards and the recording of the event. But it does show how the policy and regulatory landscape is changing rapidly. So we're all hearing and have heard so much about the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And this is like so important because it impacts on all companies, indirectly and directly. So while it directly impacts large companies have to also report on their supply chain. So it indirectly will impact SMEs. And reporting is starting in 2025 and 2024 data. I won't go into that in any more detail, as I know Ingrid will explain this a lot better than I can. The EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is a new levy on high carbon intensive imports, such as iron, steel, fertilizer. And the aim of this levy is to prevent shifting away from products that are produced in countries outside of the EU with less stringent climate policies, and encourage, companies to obviously avail of products that are, made with the climate policies that exist, in the EU. But this will impact on companies that are importing products in from outside the EU. So reporting is starting from October this year, and it is expected that levies will be introduced in 2026. The Energy Efficiency Directive, and this is kind of a recast directive, so it's been updated from previous energy efficiency directives in 2012 and 2018. It was published in September of this year. And to date, companies, large companies or public sector companies, including Enterprise Ireland, are mandated to carry out an energy audit every 4 years if they don't have an energy management system aligned to ISO 50001. But the thresholds are decreasing here to include more SMEs. So companies with an average annual energy spend, or consumption, should I say, of greater than 10 terajoules that don't have ISO 50001 in place will have to carry out this energy audit every 4 years. And for large companies that have an energy consumption of greater than 85 terajoules, they will have to implement an energy management system if they don't have one in place. Now, it's obviously good practice, and it's what we would recommend is that, if you're consuming such a large amount of energy, that you should have an energy management system in place, as they have been shown to achieve 10% reduction in savings annually. But it's just to show, I suppose, that this is the direction of travel and is now being mandated. Under the EU trading scheme, which is the emissions trading scheme, the cost of emissions allowances have gone from €20 up to €100 per tonne recently. And the free allocations are due to be phased out in 2034. Now, this applies specifically to large companies that are part of the European Emissions Trading Scheme. The Critical Raw Materials Act is relevant for companies, obviously, that are using critical raw materials. And this act was proposed by the European Commission in 2023 and is currently under review. And the aim of it is to strengthen the supply chains in relation to the use of critical raw materials. And there's a range of other directions that are, either directives or regulations that either have been approved or they're going through an approval process, such as the Green Claims Directive. And the aim of the Green Claims Directive is to eliminate greenwashing, which are misleading environmental claims. And it also creates that level playing field for companies, because it can be hard to know, companies now are nearly afraid of greenwashing and they're not sure kind of what to report. And what to publicly say. So it creates that, kind of level playing field, and it provides detailed rules for companies and how they should report and how they should market their environmental impacts and their performance. And there's a range of other, legislation as well that's currently under review. So this is just like a quick overview of recent changes and proposed changes. And I think when you hear from Ingrid and Sheila, you will see that the direction of travel is clear from their regulatory perspective and also from your customer perspective in terms of the businesses and corporate companies looking to the supply chain to help them improve their environmental performance. So it absolutely makes business sense to act now, as well as being the right thing to do. And this applies to your organization, whether it's small, medium, or large. So our message from the webinar series is not to delay, to take action, and that there's government supports and grants to help you with that. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and I'll hand over to you, Ingrid.
Thanks, Kathleen. Great, I'll just see if I can share here. Can everybody see the start
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right. I'm just going to move people out of the way so I can see it myself. So thank you so much for your introduction. And my head is spinning, right? I'm sure everybody else's head is spinning. So when Kathleen asked me to just join the series of webinar, and again, if you haven't seen the others, please do. Brian was very good last week as well around CSRD. So I'm building a little bit on that. But ultimately, it's about getting ready, getting started, and taking it as a positive thing. We're all living in a changed world, and adapting and our business to a new landscape is something that we should do anyway. And I believe, and I'm originally from Belgium, but I believe our Irish companies are really great at that. They're flexible, they're agile, and when we put our mind to it, we can do it all. So I want us to put our mind to it, like the rugby team is putting their mind to it in France, and we just need to all get onto the pitch and start doing our thing. So some key takeaways, I'm starting with the end. So big or small companies, it doesn't matter. It's the sustainability directives that are coming down the track already imposed on some of us, they will impact all of us. It's about understanding what it is that we need to do. So we need to assess what is material to you. The word material is the same as important, but it's a word that has been used in GRI and across all the directives. And then it's about, when you know what is important to you, what you can improve on, what your impact is, only then go and check out what is the data that you need to report on. Data collection is core. Where do you get the data from? And ultimately, the data is to improve it. So it's about our behavioral change, our transition plans, but the data is one way of showing that we can make progress. And that is important for the reporting. The other way we can show progress is to create transition plans. And one directive that Kathleen hasn't talked about, and just briefly going to touch on, is the CS3D, or the due diligence directive, which is all about transition plans. So it's about evidencing that you know where your baseline is, and you also know where you're going to go, what your target is, and how you get there. Really, really important. And as Kathleen said, your scope is not only your own operation, your own business, big or small, it is who you buy from and who you sell to. So the sooner we collaborate with everybody, because everybody is on the same boat, we're all on the same train, then we can accelerate faster. So if nothing else you take away from what I'm going to say today, and I'm flying through it because there's a lot. However, please reach out to me directly or to the EI team to get more information. Don't stay in your own company, in your own mind. Reach out. We're all here to help, and we're all here to engage. So I'm quickly going to whiz through, and I hope, again, this is going to be shared. I hope it'll be valuable to you. So quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the regulatory background, how we as Future Planet have focused on how to make all of this easier for companies to do, a little bit focus on net zero, how we need to engage the supply chain, and then how you need to take your first step. So our regulatory requirement. Our past was voluntary. The SDGs, we all know about the SDGs, but they were voluntary. And they've been around since 2005, so nearly 20 years. And for 20 years, we all had the opportunity to put in place policies, practices, actions, targets. And I think we've all been slow, not only companies, also countries. Policies are only coming to fruition now. And so we're a bit too late, because by our Paris Agreement, our 1.5 degrees increase, we're accelerating too fast. So by 2030, we have a target in Europe to reduce our carbon emission, our GHG emission, by 55%, and we need to be net zero by 2050. And that's across companies, that's across countries. So the reason why we're seeing all these directives and EU taking the lead in the world on sustainable development is that we want to make sure that we get there. The targets are big, and therefore the directives that are coming are holistic. So the CSRD is the one that is ahead of us now. As Kathleen said, the first tranche of companies that need to comply will need to start collecting their data and their evidence in 2024 for delivery in reporting in 2025. We need to know that the EU taxonomy is linked to it. We also see the CS3D that's coming down the track. Kathleen has spoken about the Green Claims Directives, and there'll be more. So it's a full program of directives that the EU is developing and that member states will need to transition to and transpose into law. A really quick update, what is CSRD about? And it has been passed in August only this year, but it's starting next year. So there's 12 different standards. 2 are cross-cutting, so they apply to all companies, where then there's 10 that are very topical, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean with that. The double materiality has become really, really important. And if you start with nothing else, then the double materiality exercise is absolutely what you need to start with, because that will decide what is important to your business. And the double lens has to do with what is climate change doing to your business, the growth of your business. So what are the risks and the opportunities we need to plan for, we need to assess, not only for now, but also in the future, not only actual, but also potential. So it's kind of a broad sustainability planning. But the other side as well, what is the inside out perspective? So how are our business decisions impacting the environment and the society around us? That double materiality is specific in Europe. So you might have heard of the US ISSB and their standards, the IFRS 1 and 2. They are less focused around the inside out, what impact do we have on the environment and the society around us. There will be conversions in time, but ultimately at the moment, and I believe this is the right thing to do, we need to understand what are the risks and opportunities to our business and what is the impact that we have on society around us and on the environment. So double materiality is really, really important. We've got a real big focus in the CSRD. It's about looking back and forth. Again, there's stricter rules, but there's phased implementation. One additional element is there needs to be an external third-party assurance. Initially, it's going to be limited, but ultimately it's going to be whatever you say in your sustainability statement will need to be integrated with your financial statement, and one needs to align with the other. And the third-party external assurance is going to be mandatory for that. And not only that, we need to publish our statement, our sustainability statement. So we need to tell them what we do, when we do it, how we do it, and what our targets are. And it needs to be digitally tagged. So it's the first time also that from a benchmarking point of view, the EU wants to drive that transparency. Transparency is disclosure, and it's all about eliminating the greenwashing. So that's the background of it all. EU wants to eliminate greenwashing. EU is pushing through a lot of directives. Very busy slide, however, very important, because I want you to take away 2 things, or maybe 3. Under the ESRS 1 and 2, these are mandatory. So for companies that need to comply with the CSRD, you need to do what is set in ESRS 1 and 2. Under ESRS 1, there's a lot of description of how you need to do it, but the double materiality here is called out as a requirement. So don't forget to do that. The ESRS 2, for any company who already have done the TCFD, and again, so many acronyms, it's crazy, but this is a framework that actually has developed over time, and it's focusing around what is in place around your governance, around sustainability? What is your strategy? What are the impact, risks, and opportunities, how you manage that in your business? And what are your targets and metrics? That also is mandatory. The double materiality exercise you're going to do, what is most important to us, will decide if any of the other 10 are going to be important to you. So do the double materiality exercise first, because they will decide, oh, we need to report on climate change, for example. Climate change is focused around the energy and the carbon, the GHG emissions. So if GHG emission is deemed important, then under E1, the standards to report, you will see what your data is that you need to report on, but also your evidence of policies, of process, of action plans, targets, and metrics. And again, if you don't take anything else away from this screen, it is that there's a structure. So whatever you need to report on, you need to report on policies under all these 10 topical standards, the processes, what action plans you have in place, what targets you're trying to achieve, and how you're going to measure. So topical have the same structure, but the cross-cutting, the top two, are important to do. Underneath, it also needs to be noted that the EU is still working on sector-specific, so there is going to be additional requirements for high climate impact sectors, but they're developed next year. That's the timeline. Okay, away from the busy screen, and I just wanted to touch on the CS3D. Here, the importance is about the transition plans. So showing how you're going to do it. We need to align our supply chain with the 1.5 target. We need to achieve climate neutrality or net zero by 2050. And the scope is also our suppliers, direct and indirect. This is huge. I mean, for supply chain people who do this for a living, we map our value chain or our supply chain all the way to the raw material to make sure that we understand how many suppliers are involved in the chain from the raw material into us and then all the way out to our customer. And this is called heat mapping or visibility mapping. Not everybody has ever seen this in the light from a sustainability point of view. Now we need to review this in the light of what are the risks and opportunities that are existing in our supply chain when we want to achieve the 1.5 degree target. Same for human rights. So today we're focusing a lot more around net zero and the emissions. However, the same applies for human rights. So there's a huge social focus as well in the CS3D around what is happening in your supply chain. Again, it's about transparency. It's about tell us where you are. Good, bad, ugly, just show us your baseline. Show us then what you're trying to achieve in the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years. And now tell us how you're going to do it internally and with your suppliers. So it's a real business model scan that we need to do, not only of our own operations, but also of our suppliers and our customers. So a lot to do. So your 7 steps to get ready. First of all, complete your double materiality. Then when you know what is important, develop your gap analysis against the applicable ESRS. There might only be 3 out of the 10. When there's 3 out of the 10, see what you already have. If you're already reporting on other standards, I'm 100% sure you already are doing great work. You already have a bank of knowledge. You already have an inventory build-up of policies and standards and certification. Start there. Build your inventory first and see what you have. And then see what you don't have, where you need to focus your time and effort on. Make sure then that you only collect the data that you require, because ultimately you don't want to waste time. You don't have time to waste to focus on collecting the right data so that you report against the right standards and the right topics. Then it's about agreeing your action plans, and not only internally, you do this as well with your supply chain. I'm trying to always look at what is coming ahead. So when we talk about the CSRD, I'm already thinking, oh, what is the CSDDD telling us to do? So here, agree internal teams, but already go external as well. Ask for help, already extend your scope. And then also it's about a continuous impact, risk, and opportunity register, because that's going to be part and parcel of your requirement to report. Ultimately, we need to integrate the financial and sustainability reporting so that one isn't jarring with the other. Wherever we put our money in needs to be contributing to one of the elements, or definitely cannot harm the other topics. So focus around that. Don't do a gap analysis first. Complete your double materiality, because you just only focus on what matters to you. Okay, so from our point of view and a business focus, I just wanted to quickly go through how we have thought about this in the past, how we're trying to help companies to simplify this. And this is what we do. This is what I do every day of the week. I go into the maybe sometimes boring legal text and try to make sense of it all, and how we can simplify it for businesses. So we went and put our desk at the sea. We developed our own framework of thinking aligned with how a business works. So what you do in your business, we call Live Better. What you do with your suppliers, we call the Buy Better. And what we do for our customers, it sits under the Design Better methodology. So ultimately, it's not only about our financial improvement, it's also about our employees, it's about our environmental impact. In our business, the impact it's great when we focus on our energy reduction, on our scope 1 and 2, our DEI internally, which is great if we have those policies and practices in place. The impact is, as per CDP, 11.4 times bigger if we can apply the same logic and engagement with our suppliers. So you can already see the scope of our impact and our risk and our opportunities are in our suppliers. And then ultimately, we need to do the right thing for our customers. So designing out waste, as Kathleen has said, circular economy is a solution that drives so many different pillars, that delivers accelerated benefits across a lot of different areas. It's not only reducing waste, it's also becoming more efficient. It's regeneration. It's all the R's that we have learned in the past around our waste strategy. But this is how we have thought about it: to do better in your business, to do better, buy better from your suppliers, and to sell better with a lot more sustainable products or services to your customer. And another busy slide, but when we applied, after reading hundreds and hundreds of reports of the UN, OECD, SDGs, EU, and other, because the knowledge is out there, there's just too much of it. The Live by Design, we mapped it over the triple bottom line. So if we focus on our people, the social aspect of it, what are projects we need to, what are policies, what are practices that we need to improve? The same for the environment. What sits in the environment? Here we just extracted the scope 1 and 2 because that sits in our business, but the scope 3 sits with our suppliers under the Buy Better, and then our product environmental footprint, which is the footprint of our product, sits in the Design Better. So we try to extract it and make it real so that business can understand better projects they can start. So again, this is how we thought about it. And we developed GRID. And so when we bring companies through where you start to deliver your targets and sustain change, we use GRID. So it's about, let's guide you through that journey. Let's collect the data to report. Let's improve. So we develop the transition plans for the topics that you care about. And then it's about collaboration. We need to make sure we can deliver sustained change. So a quick synopsis of that. When we guide, again, bringing it back to assess what is important to you. We're streamlining it. This is just a map of a materiality assessment where the double aspect comes in. So the potential sustainable impact on your business and the stakeholder importance will tell you exactly where you should be focusing on. And here it's always in, the matrix, the top quadrant. Here we're saying it's the scope 1 and 2, air quality and water stewardship. Whatever exercise you come or topics that are important to you, it needs to be on the engagement from a financial perspective and engagement, obviously, from your stakeholders. From a reporting point of view, again, only focus on the data and the evidence that you have the biggest impact on, that is most important to you. So configure your data to collect, to then extract, to then apply the specific conversions on, to then include into your report. We've looked at all different standards. So I'm a certified GRI professional, again, which I would recommend everybody doing because it gives a great holistic approach into what actually CSRD also wants to achieve. But ESRS is really well built on the GRI framework as well. And so all of this can be brought together, focusing around the data you need, the evidence of policies and procedures. The improve is actually where we started. And we started with, we believe there's a lot of companies out there who do reporting really well. The improvement, the transition plans, the action plans is where a lot of the time was spent on Excels, and it's the engagement and how can we all work together. So we developed, as Kathleen said, a Google map for sustainability where we help you to assess where you are. We create your gap to good to then ultimately deliver your action plan. You can invite whoever you want. We will suggest metrics that are coming out of the ESRS or GRI or whatever framework you need to align to then measure your improvement, because ultimately it's all about improvement. The EU is saying, show us where your baseline is, show us your target for the topics that matter, and show us how you're going to get there. Do it internally, but don't forget your supply chain. So that's how we focused our own thinking as well. So that's a little bit about us. It is about GRIT, the guide to report, to improve, to deliver. So the direction will drive the need for the data. The data will drive the need for action. Action will drive performance, and the performance will drive growth. And so we're loading all the governance frameworks in there, so you don't have to know all the requirements. And ultimately, it's around the topics that you care about. So the double materiality will show you what is important to you and your business. So that's how we've thought about it. Now, enough about us. What is net zero? Quickly focusing around net zero. This is a slide you're all familiar of. Net zero has to do with scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1, everything to do in your organization, what you generate. Scope 2 is actually what you buy, the electricity, energy you buy. And scope 3, indirect, the upstream activities, is everything that happens in your supply chain, downstream, everything that happens towards your customer. And there's 15 categories. We don't need to go into it, but this is a structured way of understanding which of these elements is constituting the majority of my greenhouse gases. So a little bit of a background around, again, the regulatory environment. The Paris Agreement obviously set the 1.5 degree in 2015. The national delegated contributions, all the different countries signed up to it. The EU then turned it into the Fit for 55 package, 55 meaning 55% reduction by 2030. And since then, they have developed different directives. The EU taxonomy is there to understand and benchmark the green investment, as Kathleen Zek already said, the EU ETS, the trading scheme, the CBAM that just came in to make sure that there's a level playing field, the CSRD that is coming very soon to a screen nearer to you, and the CSDDD, which is in draft, hasn't been finalized, but making sure that whatever we do, we take that into account as well. So there's a whole package that the EU Green Deal is driving, and as a member state, Ireland will transpose this, all these, or already has, into law, and therefore we need to tell you how you can embed this into your business, and we're trying to make it easy. Bring it right back down to what we need to do. And now my screen is frozen. Let me try to do it another way. There you go. So for me, in relation to your supply chain, the key considerations are it unlocks supply chain transparency. So it requires to comply or explain. If you don't comply, you need to explain why. Transparency is not an option, and Scope 3 is a big ask. Understanding Scope 3 data, your greenhouse gases in your supply chain, is not easy. But that's where we need to make sure that we go back to the chain. So collaboration is the key of success. And so we need to focus on assessing our current supply chain, engage, because everybody is on the same train. We're all in this together. So everybody, to some form, some level of transparency, needs to do this. So understanding your sustainability reporting boundary is really important. Your own, your upstream, your downstream. I'm not going to stay too long here. Again, this is probably too much detailed information, but this is actually the climate change. This is the carbon and energy reporting requirements that sits under the E1, which is climate change. You'll see from a strategic point of view, they want to understand your transition plan, how you have engaged with stakeholders, your resilience and your business model responses, if you have internal carbon pricing schemes, and what your IRO, your impact, risk and opportunities are. Then it's around the implementation. What are the policies you have to manage energy reduction, efficiency, green energy supply, or carbon? What are the targets you're going to achieve, and show us your action plans and your resources. And then the performance measures, these are more the data related elements. They are asking you about, show me the absolute or the value or the percent of your energy consumption and the mix. Show me your scope 1, 2, and 3 total, the intensity, what you're removing, the carbon credits, internal carbon, and so forth. So it's a real structured way of when climate change as a topic is important to you, this is the way you need to respond. These are the articles you need to adhere to comply with a specific topic. Because ultimately the goal, and again, this is coming straight out of the ESRS documentation, the goal is about, first of all, minus 55% target by 2030 and 2050 net zero. You'll see the first part is reduction planned in our own organization. The second one, reduction expected in value chain. So there's a must, there's a need, and rather sooner than later, show us what you're doing, show us your target, show us the resources and how you're engaging with your supply chain. So quickly about supply chain, because again, I'm probably over time. So we're all in this together. We're all value partners. And again, 99.8% of your suppliers to your customer, or you're listening to this today, you might be an SMA, you might be saying, this doesn't apply to me. But it actually will come to everybody. So 24 million SMEs are in Europe. It applies to 50,000 large organizations across, but these 24 SMEs, they're all trading with these larger organizations. So ultimately, it will trickle down to you. And we're all part and parcel of this one big value chain. CSRD is mandating that we all focus around the E and the S and the G, and the preparing now, again, it's nearly like a Brexit over, but it's so much bigger. But prepare now needs to be seen as a competitive advantage, because you might or you mightn't have already been seeing bids or tenders where in the tender request, they're asking you for, show me what your sustainability plan is. What are your action plans in relation to reducing your greenhouse gases? What is your water policy? So this is coming down the track. The sooner you do this in a very structured way, the easier it'll get for you, and it will bring you on the journey of being really a preferred supplier or a preferred customer. So today it really is about building that awareness of, okay, what is important to us? What can we do? What should we do? Creating the interest. Then it's about self-motivated action. So what are we doing with the help of Enterprise Ireland? Because they're always, to be fair, they're always behind us, supporting us as SMEs and large organizations. From a supply chain point of view, you can consider these initial actions. I'm not going to go through it. Ultimately, it's really about how can you bring your supply chain partners into the fold. They also need to do this. Take the lead. Be the change, because ultimately there's different accelerators, and for different organizations, there's different focuses that you can do. As Kathleen already said, circular economy and waste is a big one. Greenhouse gas scope 3 is a big one. We would always start with sustainable procurement, because that absolutely puts the policies and practices in place and reviews all your engagement with the market. And ultimately, it's about making sure that we have these collaborative action plans to make sure that we have these environmental and social human rights initiatives that are across our value chain. So this is the end, really. I'm ending where I started. Key takeaways: assess what is important to you, where you can make the biggest difference. Then see what data is necessary to report on, or what data your supplier or your customer needs, and have that open conversation. It needs to be the same information. It can be anything different. Then create the transition plans to improve and collaborate across. And again, ask for help. Support is there from Enterprise Ireland. So anything we can do as well, just let us know. And thanks so much for listening. I hope it wasn't too much.
That was absolutely brilliant, Ingrid. Thank you so much. And well done. You got through such an amount, I suppose, of material in a fairly short space of time. We will be sharing the slides afterwards, because I think they're definitely interested in people following up, and we will share the recording. A few questions have come through the Q&A. We'll look at those at the end, but I invite anyone else to put any questions into the Q&A. And just in the interest of time, I'll invite Sheila O'Loughlin, Senior Market Advisor in our UK London office, to join us and to give examples that Sheila has seen in the UK from a business perspective, and I suppose also as well in terms of changing policies and regulations in the UK. Thanks very much, Sheila, for joining us today.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here. And can you see my first slide?
We can, yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay, lovely. Hello, everybody. My name is Sheila Loughlin, and I'm based in our London office of Enterprise Ireland. And the London office is one of 30 in our overseas network. And our aim in the overseas offices, I'm sure a lot of you know us by now, is to work with Irish-owned businesses and to help them to start and scale in overseas markets. The UK is the #1 market for Irish exports from Enterprise Ireland clients, 9.2 billion in 2022, and that accounted for almost a third of all exports. And I suppose the reason why I'm here today is that a big part of what we do over the last year, 18 months, has been to look more at this area of sustainability and what our customers and buyers for our Enterprise Ireland clients are looking for in their tender documents, in their supplier contracts, etc. So 3 things I'm going to just cover off quickly today. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the UK market with regards to net zero. What's the status? What's the sentiment? And what's the recent activity? Then go into a little more of a deep dive into some key sectors, companies, groups of companies, and their approach, and what that means for the supply base and what that means for Scope 3, as Ingrid was talking about, the supply chain. And then thirdly, just to give a very brief overview of the UK team and some of our plans and activities around net zero and sustainability. So okay. So if we look at the UK, in spite of some of the news you may have seen over recent weeks, the UK was one of the leading forces in terms of driving net zero and had very strong commitment from government, ambitious plans, and industry really getting behind the net zero agenda. Indeed, in 2019, became the first major economy to set a legally binding target to be net zero by 2050. That would mean a 68% reduction by 2030 and a 78% reduction in emissions by 2035. We're the first and only industrialization to almost completely phase out coal. And we have quite a strong story in terms of the energy mix coming from renewable, especially wind power. And just this week, SSE Renewables, their Dogger Bank wind farm, delivered the first power to the grid in the UK, and that's seen as a major achievement and a sign of things to come. So all good stuff happening, but it really put us, I suppose, in a race with the US Inflation Reduction Act, the EU Green Deal Act, etc., etc. So now we have 136 countries, 83% of emissions covered in the world now have net zero pledges. So the UK is one of the leaders and one of the many countries in the race now. And then I gave this presentation a few weeks ago, and I had some lovely targets and showing off about the UK. And then over the last couple of weeks, I've had to insert the picture at the bottom there and add some of the little red bits to that. So as you probably have seen, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, announced a new approach for the government and how it was going to pursue UK's net zero goals and new policies to underpin that change. So you'll see that the main one there being the new petrol and diesel cars pushed back to 2035, the ban. And this has led to a feeling of uncertainty and doubt and worry from industry. So the chair of Ford UK has said that 3 things are needed by government to achieve net zero: ambition, commitment, and consistency. And obviously this has put that at risk. But there is, I will say, still a very positive feeling in UK industry about the opportunity that exists if we can get net zero right in the UK. The CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, has said that the growth prize, the green growth prize, could be anything between 37 and 57 billion boost to GDP in 2030. And that comes around things like EVs, low carbon power, green services, hydrogen, etc., where the UK has competitive strengths. So some changes recently, but not a negative picture. And really, I won't go into these, but some of the key documents, it all kicked off the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution that was published in 2020. And those 10 points were around offshore wind, hydrogen, nuclear power, jet zero, greener buildings, etc. Then it went into more detail around sectors in October 2022, the Powering Up Britain report, looking at the future of energy, greening finance, which is how to create a net zero aligned financial centre and to promote green investment. And then Ingrid has touched a lot on sustainability regulation and disclosure standards. The UK will publish theirs in 2024 based on the IFRS sustainability disclosure standards. ESG reporting in the UK is required by listed and large companies. At the moment, there are many companies who are not required to report on ESG that are doing it as best practice. So I think really the direction of travel is for disclosure, and more companies are doing it. And I think the key point around this is that as these larger businesses begin to make their corporate pledges to achieve carbon neutrality, it's inevitable that if you're in the supply chain of these companies, you're going to be asked to report it at some stage. And it really does give you a competitive advantage if you do. So just, again, I won't go into this, but Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have all got separate plans, Scotland being the most ambitious, I suppose, want to reach net zero by 2045. They narrowly missed their 2021 targets, very narrowly, but you can read more about all their pledges there and the investment behind them. So I just thought I'd spend a minute or two on UK manufacturing, because it's the UK's third most emitting sector in terms of emissions, and it has reduced emissions by 17% over the last 5 years, but there's still a very long way to go. And a good report to read is the manufacturing sector net zero roadmap, which outlines different segments of the manufacturing sector and how they're doing. But I think the key is, as our former Prime Minister Theresa May said, net zero should be seen as the growth opportunity of the century, not as an act of economic harm. So there's an understanding it's going to take a lot of investment, but I feel there's an increasing appreciation in manufacturing that actually some of the efficiencies that can be gained and some of the competitive advantages that can be gained around implementing net zero strategies is being better understood, and also some of the jobs and the opportunities that are in these areas I've listed around nuclear, EV, etc., etc. So yeah, some strong opportunities for companies there. So over 80% of UK producers have a net zero strategy in place, and over half are implementing. Now, that's not to say there's a lot of companies who haven't got a net zero strategy in place, but it is moving towards more and more companies all the time. And I just thought this slide was interesting in the context of levelling up. And you may have heard recently about HS2 and some of the issues around levelling up between the north and the south, and the north and England and the southeast. And this is a report from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, which is, I'd recommend having a read of some very interesting stuff around where the net zero hotspots are in the UK in 2023. And it lists 20,000 businesses that are seen to be in the net economy, gross value add of 71 billion, higher productivity and higher average wage in this sector. And what's interesting to me is where some of those hotspots are. So Scotland around renewables, the Midlands, Yorkshire and the Humber Net Zero Plan, for example, and a higher concentration of net zero jobs in these regions over London and the southeast. So it's certainly an opportunity to deliver on a levelling up strategy. So what does this all mean for everybody listening in today? Well, I think really the net zero sustainability challenge is certainly impacting government policy, investor decision-making, consumer preferences, and certainly changing how companies are working with their supply chain partners. And so one of our roles in the UK Office of Enterprise Ireland is to make sure that Irish companies who are either selling to or want to start to sell to the UK really understand how the market dynamics are changing and put in place the right plans to future-proof their UK business. And the supply chain is key. So the average multinational will generate over 11 times more emissions in their supply chain than in their own operations. And what we've seen, we did a couple of webinars two and a half years ago on net zero in the UK. And then we were talking about maybe it's sort of a nice to have, you can really get a competitive advantage if you start to look at carbon reduction plans with some of your UK buyers or customers. Now, Scope 3 is a key issue for our UK companies, and actually they're requesting it and that they're requiring it in order to supply. So, and they're making their priorities and expectations clear. And what I've done, without going into detail there, I've tried to cover a number of different sectors, but what we'll find is each of the sectors or key industries in the UK have set their own plans. So water, you'll see, is for 2030, other sectors for 2050. And most of the associations have a very detailed plan together on how they're going to achieve that. So whichever sector you're targeting, it's a good idea to have a look at really what they have planned. And what I'm going to do now is just quickly talk through a couple of examples of companies and sectors. And in all cases, I've tried to find companies that our Enterprise Ireland clients are actively selling to, and are being asked questions around net zero and sustainability as part of their supplier engagement with some of these companies. A lot of them are multinationals that have operations in the UK, but you will get a similar story from any of our offices in the overseas network in terms of what their customers or our buyers are looking for in the market. So just GSK, you can see it there. They have very strong ambitions around net zero and renewable electricity for 2025, etc. They're investing in that. But what they've done is they've put together a sustainable procurement program. So asking suppliers to disclose emissions, set carbon reduction and delivery targets, 10% waste reduction, etc. And what we find is that some companies are selling directly to GSK, others are not, but they're in the supply chain somewhere. So it's going to be pushed back on them at some stage. And the good news is that companies are making it quite clear what they're looking for. AstraZeneca is another one. They have a sustainability partner guide and framework, so you can go in and see exactly what they need. This is from an Enterprise Ireland client that was tendering for a project with one of the large water utilities in the UK. And it's just to show some of the language they're talking about. So explain your approach to carbon reduction, show us how you promote the use of recycled materials, your provision of sustainability training to the workforce. And then on the right-hand side, how do you work with your supply chain around carbon, and how do you manage carbon? So really asking for specific examples. And this is Severn Trent, and they're one of the largest water and wastewater companies in the UK, supplying 4.6 million households. And in 2022, they renewed their supplier selection questions to reflect their new ambitions around net zero. So you'll see there they've got a sustainable supply chain charter, an engagement team around it, a corrective programme. So if you are selling to them or you want to sell to Severn Trent or any of the water companies, really, you need to really have that plan in place. But they will again be very clear in terms of what they're looking for, and we'll work with you on that. Again, this is a nice example because it's the power sector, a very large multinational energy company, part of SSE, headquartered in Perth in Scotland, again responsible for 3.8 million homes and businesses. And they're all about the greener grid and how to get their supply chain more sustainable, to such an extent that they've actually launched a sustainable supplier code in May 2023. And the plan is eventually to get to 80% of its supply chain to have its own carbon reduction plan. So you can see, I won't go into detail there, but you can see that again, they've really detailed what they would like out of their supply base. NHS, anyone selling to the NHS will know this, but they've really taken the bull by the horns in terms of sustainability and net zero, responsible for 5% of the UK carbon footprint, and ambitious goals again around direct and indirect emissions by 2045, targets for that. So at the moment, if you're a supplier with contracts over 5 million, you've got to have a CRP. All suppliers from next year. It is proportional. So if you're an SME supplying to the NHS, I'm not looking for full, very detailed carbon reduction plans, but it is coming. And they have produced quite a detailed sustainable supplier assessment tool called Evergreen, which you can use to sort of measure where you are in line with their own goals around sustainability. And that's just a bit of detail. So social value more generally is basically a third of the UK government spend is on goods and services. So social value is the part that isn't the price, isn't the quality, but actually the bit where you can add some real value. And there's a 10% weighting minimum on contracts that if you're selling to the public sector, that's how much they're minimum they're weighting on this part of it. And social value is across social, economic, and environmental. You can see the examples there. And so some councils like Manchester City Council, up to 40% of that tender document is going to be weighted around what you bring to social value. And I think some of the things, we do a lot on this in the UK offices. How can you demonstrate your social value in the region? How can you use that to sort of build your competitive advantage and promote that again, on social media within a number of different councils. Each council and part of the government is looking for something slightly different, but it's coming down the track, and those companies selling will know that. And we have an event around that next week, which I'll talk about in a minute. And again, just this slide just shows, I suppose, the language that's being used. It's going from economically advantageous tenders to advantageous tenders. So less focus on price, while it's still really, really important, and a little more emphasis on the social value side. Automotive, if you're selling in there, Drive Sustainability is actually a European program, but a lot of the supply chain will sit in the UK. And again, overtly asking questions around your energy management systems, your CSR, your environmental management systems, etc. And Jaguar Land Rover, headquartered Coventry, one of the largest automotive companies in the UK. They are looking at achieving net zero emissions, but they're talking about how their supply chain, asking the supply chain tier one, and then their tier ones will ask their own supply chains, how can they help them on this decarbonisation pathway? And again, I won't go into that. Aviation again. Another example of a company, Rolls-Royce. What are their targets? What does that mean for suppliers? So it's very clearly marked. Another thing we're seeing quite a bit of is grouping together of companies across a sector or an industry, just come together to figure out how best to manage their supply chain emissions as a collective. So we have 12 telecoms, 12 of the largest telecoms companies in the UK, so the likes of BT, Sky, TalkTalk, Three, Virgin Media, are coming together a number of times before COP28 to talk about their supply chain. 90% of the emissions are indirect. So what can they do to come together with a collective solution for that? And the same with the supermarkets. So these companies, these 8, will cover 80% of grocery sales. And if you think that food and drink is 35% of the UK's emissions, it's really imperative that these companies figure out a solution. And actually, they're down in their scope 1 and 2 emissions, these supermarkets, these grocery stores, but actually it's on their scope 3, which is responsible for 97% of their emissions. So the majority have actually gone up. So how can they come together, and what impact will it have on the supply chain? And I suppose really on this side of it, the supermarkets ultimately set the sustainability targets for the rest of the agri supply chain. So if we look at where they're going and what they're asking their farmers to do, it's a good benchmark if you're supplying into the farmers or to the supermarkets or the processors, what exactly you can do to help them to meet their standards. And there's just some of the plans that some of those supermarkets have outlined. So that's, I mean, I know there's a number of sectors on the call today, and I have other examples from different sectors. So please just ask afterwards if you want to understand better. We have people across Manchester and London who cover these sectors listed here, and they will be able to help you to understand, depending on which sector you're selling to or you'd like to sell to, what actually are some of the standards and disclosures and supply chain requirements in your area. We've lots going on in the UK. So we recently did a webinar on hydrogen. We have a social value programme. We have a public sector event next week in Dublin, and across education, local authorities, etc. We run webinars, events and reports. So have a look at our website. And then just finally, I wanted to talk about our sustainability advisory panel. And this really came about because of some of the stuff that I've been talking about. And really what we want to do is understand what are some of the most pressing sustainability challenges facing each of the industry sectors that Irish companies will be trying to sell to. And what are the procurement requirements? What do some of the net zero changes mean if you're trying to sell into that? What do you need to understand specific to each sector? So we're putting together a panel which will be made up of sustainability leaders across each industry. And we're going to use that to help us to guide ourselves and our Irish companies. So please come and talk to me about that if you'd like to know more. And final slide is just some resources that we use if you want to learn more about the UK and some of the standards. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Some really great examples there across all sectors. And as you said, look, if anyone wants to reach out afterwards, like feel free to reach out to Sheila directly, or perhaps through our green inbox, and we can make that connection for you in relation to a specific sector in the UK. But look, that was really good overview, and I think both your kind of slides and Ingrid's slides, there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of really good links to reports. So we'll definitely be sharing those afterwards. So people can follow up themselves, especially in relation to their own sector, for example. So I think, look, in the interest of time, we just go straight to the Q&A. We have a few questions. I can see Ankush, my colleague, has answered a few, which is great. So we'll just go to the few questions that are there, and we'll wrap up then. I'm conscious of time. So if you do have to go, don't worry, we will share the recording afterwards. So the first question, Ingrid, is for you, and it is just in relation to the whole double materiality and perhaps examples of reports. Are there any good examples, or is there a good resource, I suppose, to read up on this? Could you suggest?
And thanks. It's actually a good question, because as Kira Del Prete, who is the chair of IFRAG, said, double materiality hasn't been done before. This is a new requirement. We have done materiality assessment, even with the view from inside out, but not to the extent that the CSRD is requesting. So is there already a report? Has somebody already done this as per the CSRD? Not that I have seen in the fullness of CSRD, or they're in the process of it, because again, companies that need to report from 2024, they will need to know the data that they need to start structuring. So they're doing it. Companies are in the process. The bigger organizations are in the process, and they have done double materiality in the past, but maybe not stringent to what the CSRD requires. So if you're a smaller company and you don't have to, you're not one of the tranches of 2024, 2025, wait a few more months. Apart from that, I've written a guide. We have a 6-step process, if anybody's interested, of how we have developed the process of do your sector preview first, then engage on the financial materiality questions, the risks and opportunities. Then it's about bringing in the voice of the environment and the societal, the community from an impact point of view, to then inform the map and making sure that you have your evidence around the process. I can share that afterwards, but we will see a lot of great examples, I believe, in the next few months. So if you can wait, that would be great. And you can learn and steal with pride, because ultimately we're all in this together. So it needs to map to what your sector as well. Per sector, the process isn't different, but the starting point and the outcome will be different of what is important to you. So.
And I suppose that's weight in terms of materiality assessment, but not weight in terms of taking action.
Yes, absolutely. And so there's a few steps. You can already start, building your inventory of your policies, what you currently have, what you already are famous for, or you might have a sustainability report. You're already on the journey. Start collecting. If you don't have your inventory yet of what you currently do, your policies, your procedures, your action plans, your improvements, your targets, certifications, award, already bring it together. Put a library together of that, and then also a library of the legal requirements. It's not only the CSRD. We know there's national requirements as well, or in your sector there's requirement, or there is alignment with ISO standards or other standards. Pull that together. So, what is legally required, what is voluntary, you already have signed up, and then maybe what your competition is doing. There's, do a little bit of a horizon of what is my competition telling the market that they want to be famous for. So understand your own landscape. Ultimately, if you bring all of that together, you have a great starting point of kind of, the focus, the direction of travel, as you and Sheila have used. from a materiality point of view. So you can start tomorrow by doing already desk research. Then it's about making sure that you have that engagement. So it's about surveys and it's about interviews, your internal stakeholders, your leadership team, survey your external stakeholders, your suppliers, your customers, the non-for-profits, the charities, the community engagement, government agencies, to understand their voice. And then it's about bringing all of that together. So there's lots in a double materiality assessment. You don't have to wait, but good examples. Look, there's definitely good examples of how materiality has been done in the past. Good examples in accordance with the CSRD, which was signed off in August this year. We'll see good examples in the next few weeks and months ahead.
Thanks, Ingrid. And do you have a view then on approaches, I suppose, for smaller companies to align to CSRD, even though, as we know, they're not directly impacted and they're not required or mandated, but they will indirectly because they're actually supplying into a larger company?
Yeah,
so and again, better.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the EFRAG, who have developed these standards for the EU Commission, also developed a draft which is called VSRS, which is the Voluntary Standard Sustainability Reporting Standards. It's 14 principles. It's 42 disclosures, and the majority of the disclosures, like there's 3 per topic. It's not as broad and wide, but what the EU is trying to do is make it easy for SMEs to actually focus on what matters to them and what information their customers or their suppliers might come and ask them. So that would be my first step. It's still in draft. The EU has focused on the CSRD to get that over the line. But the draft has been developed in December 2022. They're starting again to review it. So the hope is that that draft is going to be approved in 2024. But you can already see the draft. It's not heavy. As I said, 14 principles, 42 disclosures of maybe 15 might be applicable to you. Again, what is important to you? So that's where I would start. Start there and already ask your customers, what is it that they need? Because the chain need to be strengthened and streamlined. But the VSRS is a good starting point.
That's brilliant. And look, we'll share the link to the VSRS in our email after today's event for people to look at. But I think that's really great advice. It's a good place to look at. And it's not, as big as the actual CSRD, but it will help companies provide the information that the large corporate is looking for in terms of their carbon emissions, their carbon reduction roadmap, all of that across the different areas, whether it be water, whether it be carbon, whether it be, pollution. So we'll share those guidelines afterwards. So then just one final comment then. So very insightful, Ingrid, and a lot coming down the line. You mentioned that businesses may be fearful. Would there also be a complete lack of interest or the long finger approach in sustainability actions? And how can someone encourage motivation to act on CSRD and sustainability?
It's actually a good question. We are, I'm being contacted nearly daily about, we have this customer who's in their new tendering process are now asking us to show what's our sustainable strategy. How do we measure our GHG? So it is a business demand that is coming down the track. So if for nothing else, to secure your current customer base, but to increase your new leads, you can turn this into a competitive advantage. When you know your biggest impact in sustainability, when you know your action plans and your data, when you've done this exercise, you should use it to promote yourself. And again, for me, Ireland is the ideal country in Europe to take a lead on this. I'm working across multiple industries to actually bring different anchor companies together to just drive this, because I believe, and again, I can say this because I'm from Belgium, but I believe the Irish mindset is agile, is flexible. We don't have a legacy of we can't. We are nearly a why not nation. And once we put our mind to it, we just go and do it. And I want all of us just to put our mind to it, because this can be the biggest market grab in the UK, in Europe, and around the world from a kind of a new tag. The green in Ireland isn't only green, it's socially green, it's green and social, it's sustainable. So I do believe we already have so much available to us. It's not that it's a new exercise, it's just a rescan with the additional questions, with the sustainable criteria, with the social criteria, and we need to just build in that sustainability lens, sustainable practices in the way we do business, the way we ask from our suppliers what we want to purchase, and the way we sell to our customers what the benefits are of our products and services. So for me, it's increased revenue, it's increased reputation, it's production or productivity efficiency, it's increased loyalty, it is going down to the bottom line. And there's plenty of studies that says people who do sustainability well are continuously reporting and delivering higher returns on investment. So it's not only a good thing to do, it's also good to the business. So paying forward and giving back and getting back. Getters give and givers get. And so it's about, ultimately it's about making it happen and starting today for a sustainable performance tomorrow. So
I think that's a really good note to finish on in terms of starting today for sustainable performance tomorrow. So thank you so much, Ingrid, and thank you, Sheila, as well, for joining us today. Really fantastic insights from the policy perspective, from the business perspective, from both. And as I said, look, we'll share slides. I am conscious of time. We have gone a little bit over, but I think it's a really engaging topic, and we covered a lot in the time that we had. So just as we wrap up, I'd just like to share my screen first of all, and just remind you of our upcoming webinars. So we have 2 webinars left in this webinar series. The next one is actually on green skills, and we will hear from Skillnet, and we will also hear from the Irish University Association on their microcredits, their small programs in relation to sustainability. And then the following week, we will have IMR in relation to their Circulera program about closing the circular innovation gap. So there are 2 final webinars. I'd just like to bring to your attention, we have a new sustainability Kickstarter workshop to engage companies at the very early stages of their journey to develop an initial action plan. This is a half-day workshop. It's free to Enterprise Ireland and to local Enterprise Office clients. The dates are listed there on the screen, and we'll share the slides afterwards. So contact your development advisor or local Enterprise Office advisor if you're interested in this workshop. This slide just gives an overview of the Enterprise Ireland and SAI supports from starting out. So if you're a company at the very early stages of your journey, the Climate Toolkit for Business is there to calculate an estimate of your carbon footprint, to develop an initial action plan, and to understand the actual funding landscape in Ireland. As I mentioned, we had the SME Sustainability Kickstarter workshop. And then SAI have an energy audit voucher for companies with an energy spend of greater than €10,000 per annum to do an energy audit. So what we would recommend, I suppose, is the first steps for companies. We have a range of supports then under our Climate Planning Fund for Business, which falls under our Green Transition Fund. These are a range of consultancy and training supports, and they can be to help align to CSRD. The CSRD is obviously a mandatory requirement for large companies, so it won't be in terms of the generation of the sustainability report or the external assurance that's required, but in terms of actually preparing for CSRD as outlined by Ingrid, developing policies, KPIs, targets, putting in, monitoring reports and procedures in place, building the capabilities of your internal project team around a broad range of areas. Once the focus is on the environmental, because this is the funding is under the Green Transition Fund, those type of activities can be supported under the various different supports here. The Climate Action Voucher is a 2-day fully funded support to develop an initial action plan. Green Start is a 7-day, 80% funded support. Green Plus is up to 100,000. Grant is 50%, and it's really about building internal capabilities, aligning to international standards such as ISO 14001, ISO 50001, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, really building those internal capabilities within your company across all departments within the company, from procurement to tenders, to finance, to operations, to HR. Strategic consultancy is specifically to develop a carbon reduction roadmap, and also for other investment opportunities that will lead to environmental protection, circular economy type activities, including waste reduction. We have capital supports then for installing meters so that you better understand your energy or your water or your steam usage, and to become as energy or as resource efficient as possible before making any capital investments. We have a capital support to support companies decarbonize manufacturing heating processes, so typically moving away from fossil fuel to heat pump or heat recovery, those type of activities. And we have environmental aid for really large transformative projects around the areas of environmental protection, which includes decarbonisation, circular economy type activities, reducing waste and water, and a range of activities like that are really transformative. And to keep in mind our previous webinar on the green loans that are available, in particular for SMEs. SAI have a range of supports, so check out their website, talk to SAI in relation to their community scheme, Exceed scheme, their solar supports, electric vehicles, etc. So keep in mind the supports that are available through SAI as well. But to really truly transform it, it is going to take innovation, and it is really going to take collaboration with other stakeholders, whether that's within your value chain, within your sector, across different sectors, working with clusters, technology centres. There's a lot of European funding available now for RD&I, and Enterprise Ireland has a range of supports, from our Agile Innovation support to Exploring Innovation, Innovation Voucher, Innovation Partnership, and our RD&I support. So there's a range of supports there to help companies either working within your company, or then perhaps working with other companies in terms of the European funding and the technology centres, to really develop that sustainable product, process or service. So finally, to find out more information, go to globalambition.ie Green Transition Fund, contact your development advisor, or if you're with the local enterprise office, your local enterprise office advisor, or contact with Ross or IGA if you're a client company of one of those agencies. For any information at all, we'd be happy to talk to anyone. Please email us at green@enterprise-ireland.com. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. Bye.